What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and it's been a disappointing season for the New York Giants. They're 4-8. They're still fighting for a playoff spot in a way, but also fighting for a top 5 overall pick. Weird time to be a Giants fan, but one of the most disappointing aspects of this 2023 season has undoubtedly been Evan Neal at right tackle. Now, this is a player that the Giants drafted 7th overall in the 2022 NFL Draft, entered the NFL from Alabama with very high expectations, failed to live up to them as a rookie, was quite poor in his rookie season. Now, year 2, we all went into the season expecting him to show some progress, improve, hopefully develop into a quality starter, and that just hasn't happened. It's been more disappointment and more disappointment from Evan Neal. It's been a really, really poor season, and now he's been injured, missing games, knee injury. That's his second knee injury in 2 seasons. So this is a guy who not only isn't playing well when he's on the field, but is struggling to stay on the field for a full season at a time. However, Evan Neal is not deterred by his poor performances. He doesn't feel any type of way. We've seen a lot of fans, analysts alike, kind of mention the idea that maybe Evan Neal is better suited to play offensive guard and not right tackle in the NFL. Evan Neal says, ain't no way he's doing that. He's refusing. He has no interest in moving to guard because, according to Evan Neal himself, when he stepped out of the womb, I didn't know that you step out of wombs, but when he stepped out of the womb, he was an offensive tackle. He was born to play offensive tackle in the NFL. Now, I have some thoughts about that. I don't necessarily agree with Evan Neal. I think that watching him play, I don't really get the born to play offensive tackle vibes that I'd like to see from him through these first 2 seasons. But of course, we're going to go ahead and discuss this weird decision by Evan Neal to declare that he is a born offensive tackle and will refuse to play offensive guard. We're going to discuss that and whether or not we think that he should maybe open up his mind and move over to guard in today's episode. Before we dive into all that, make sure to like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about Evan Neal saying he was born to play offensive tackle?
Jesus. How would I start? Well, I'm doing well. Evan Neal wanting to play offensive tackle. Look, I appreciate the confidence. I appreciate the fact that he doesn't want to stop. And I'll tell you exactly why I would want to play offensive tackle and not want to change. It's all about the money, man. It's all about getting that bag. Tackles objectively make significantly more money than guards. So unless you're like a perennial all-pro Zach Martin guard or like a Quentin Nelson, you are making far less than an offensive tackle. If I'm Evan Neal, I'm 22, 23 years old, I'm thinking about that bag, I better get hell of a lot better at offensive tackle if I want to stay that long term, because right now, he is one of the worst graded tackles in football. Now, progress isn't linear. We know that you can obviously take steps forward in the future. And for example, Austin Jackson with the Miami Dolphins was awful during his first season. Even his second season was poor last year. But this year, he's turned it around, has become a staple at right tackle, which is Tua Tagovailoa's blind side. So, improvement is possible. Now, there are things that I think Evan Neal struggles with that will stop him from taking those big developmental steps forward. And the primary one is his lack of athleticism, his lack of, I would say, like flexibility. His kick step is poor. He doesn't get enough depth. If you watch Andrew Thomas, he instantly creates yards of depth. That way he can consume pass rushers, mitigate edge rushers that are, kind of speed rushers around the edge, that bend. He gets so much depth that it allows him to control a rep. What happens with Evan Neal is that he doesn't get enough depth, and he's very easily, kind of sped around by edge rushers that are, relying on their speed and bend. He is really easily beaten on those. So the lack of flexibility, the lack of that kick step has, really limited him up to this point. Obviously, the injuries have become prevalent too. And you guys know this, and I've said this many times. If I'm the Giants, I'm not sitting here in next offseason thinking that Evan Neal's bouncing back and, protecting a rookie quarterback or Daniel Jones, whoever the hell's playing quarterback for us next season. I am bringing in an offensive tackle veteran to compete with Evan Neal, to push him out of that job if that's what needs to happen. I am not letting this position go untouched again. And not that it was, obviously we allocated a first-round pick to it, and it's been 2 seasons. But I do think that bringing in a veteran swing tackle to help compete, like a veteran, like a George Fant or like a Dwayne Brown of the Jets, like one of those guys that have experience, guys that can play at an even average, competent level, I'm bringing them in because ultimately we need support. And the truth is that if Evan Neal struggles, our offense is going with him. You know what I mean? How many times have we seen Evan Neal literally ruin a drive or ruin a game or ruin a momentum building kind of situation? He has been the catalyst for failure at times. And I don't think that, look, I get he wants to be an offensive tackle. I get he doesn't want to change positions because I know the money's there and maybe he doesn't want to back away from a challenge. But at a certain point, there needs to be pressure on him. The pressure can't just be like, if you fail, we have nobody else to go to. The pressure needs to be, we have a veteran coming in that's going to kick you out of your job if you don't step up and play better. And I think that's the ultimate way to get players to perform at a higher level, is to put pressure on them from an outside source. And that outside source is sometimes a guy like a free agent or a veteran who has experience there. Maybe it is Tyree Phillips. Maybe you give Tyree Phillips the opportunity to say, hey man, you can win this job outright in training camp next year. Maybe that's something that they open up and they don't just give Evan Neal this job because he's a draft pick from 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Right now, I don't want to make the same Eric Flowers mistake where we wait too long to move a guy from tackle to guard. Evan Neal has the size and frame to be a great offensive guard in the NFL, and I do think that he could, maybe develop into a competent one for us, especially because we need to address that position. But at the same time, like, I'll say this. You go out and get a veteran right guard like a Kevin Zeitler, for example, which I really, really would suggest the Giants consider doing, not just Zeitler, but another veteran in general, would promote a little bit more consistency at right tackle for Evan Neal. Evan Neal has been playing with a different right guard like every other week. Mark Lewinsky has taken a huge step in the wrong direction this year. He has had a couple of good games, otherwise been really inconsistent. He's also been hurt a couple times. I know he had a personal issue. He missed a game. So you've had Marcus McKethan there. Like, Evan Neal, not only is he injury prone right now, or has had a couple injuries, but he's also been playing against like Russian roulette at right guard. So like, how do you really develop when there's no consistency around you and you're constantly playing hurt? Right now, I'm in the boat. Bring in a veteran, let him compete. Even if it's Tyree Phillips, let him compete for the starting job. Evan Neal should not be guaranteed this job any longer. And I get he wants to stay at tackle, but he's got to freaking earn it, man. This is the NFL. You got to earn these positions these days. And Brian Dable and Joe Shane need to commit to what they've been saying for a long time now. Every single job has to be earned. We're not giving away starting jobs anymore. If they really believe what they say, they're not giving Evan Neal that job without a competition, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with you there. There definitely needs to be some sort of competition. To think that Evan Neal has just earned this starting job is insane. There's no way that he's earned it. Like, he's not played well enough to earn any starting job in the NFL. He's played really poorly. He's played at a backup level. So for him to enter the 2024 season and comfortably have the starting job would really shed a large shadow of doubt over this coaching staff and the culture that they're building, from me, in my opinion. So the Giants have to bring in some sort of offensive tackle help, And one other thing that you can mention here, Alex, and I'm going to throw out a name that I think makes a lot of sense for the Giants. It's Jonah Williams, offensive tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals. Started off playing left tackle. They traded for Orlando Brown. He moved over to the right side, requested a trade, changed his mind, having a pretty good season with the Bengals. Not anything special. He's nothing crazy, but he's definitely an upgrade over what Evan Neal is giving them. Plus, Andrew Thomas has dealt with a lot of injuries. Jonah Williams' ability to play on the right side of the line and the left side could be really valuable. So if you're talking about different names to consider to bring in as potential replacements for Evan Neal or as competition for Evan Neal, I think that Jonah Williams, offensive tackle from the Cincinnati Bengals, former first-round pick, makes a ton of sense. Another player that I would have said, Austin Jackson, just signed an extension with the Miami Dolphins, and I bring that up to say this offensive tackle market, while we want to get involved with it and see the Giants sign somebody, it's going to be competitive. The demand for decent offensive tackle play is sky high right now because across the NFL, offensive line play is just down. It's bad for many of the teams in the league. Even some of the top teams in the league are getting by with poor offensive lines, and that's really an area of improvement for everybody. Every NFL team right now is looking at ways to improve their offensive line because right now it's really tough to get a good one. Only a few of the top teams in the league have a very good offensive line. The Giants, of course, not one of them, haven't been for the last 2 decades, it feels like. So in order for them to really find those pieces to upgrade this line in free agency, they're probably going to have to spend pretty big money, and they're going to have to force it in a way and settle for a guy who's average to slightly above. But you have to know that average to slightly above, you can overpay for that if you're the Giants because it's such a massive and substantial upgrade over just league worst offensive line play, which is what you've been getting from Evan Neal. So Evan Neal needs that competition. I don't think that he's able to improve his game until he gets some sort of competition alongside him. And honestly, for what it's worth, I think sometimes for players, it's good to not be in the starting lineup for a little while. Maybe this injury to Evan Neal, he's been able to kind of sit there, reset his mind, gain some confidence, gain some mental clarity, and maybe work on some things behind the scenes. Hopefully he returns to the lineup and shows some progress going into next season. It's too late to say that this is a success of a season, even if he finishes strong, but we could say, okay, he started showing something that we can build on in 2024, and that's what you need to see from Evan Neal. He needs to show that there's signs of growth, that there's something that he can do in the future that makes him better than what he's been for the last 2 seasons. The problem with this season is that he didn't just stay bad, he got worse. Like every metric, his pressure rate allowed is increased, his sack rate allowed has increased. He was on pace before the injury for more penalties surrendered or commit rather in the season. So Evan Neal just in general went from bad to worse. And that's the really concerning part about his development, because you think back on Andrew Thomas, who's a player that didn't break out until his 3rd season. His rookie season, yeah, he struggled pretty immensely, but year 2, he started to show that progress. And so there were flashes like, okay, maybe this guy can be a really good offensive tackle. Year 3, he turned into one of the most elite pass protecting left tackles in the NFL, earned himself a ginormous contract this offseason. But we haven't seen anything close to that trajectory from Evan Neal. It was year 1 really bad, year 2 even worse. So the trajectory is moving in the opposite direction from where Andrew Thomas's was. And that's what really concerns me with Evan Neal. And that's what makes me think maybe he wasn't born to play offensive tackle. Now, if you think back on his collegiate career at Alabama, he started off as a freshman starting left guard for the Roll Tide. He then moved over to right tackle, then to left tackle, then was drafted by the Giants and put back at right tackle. Now, if you think about it, maybe he's just better suited on the left side of the line. His best season at Alabama came at left tackle, which was his final season, and he played guard on the left side, not the right side, but left guard. So maybe it's just something about being on the left side versus the right side that the Giants need to tinker with. Maybe they need to try Evan Neal out on that side. I know it's tough because you don't want to keep moving him around and trying him at all types of different positions. You want to get him to learn one spot and get used to it and get good at it. But he hasn't gotten used to it, and he hasn't gotten good at it on the right side. And I think that maybe there is an argument to be made about what can Evan Neal do on this left side of the offensive line. And I think a team around the NFL, another team who had him very highly on their draft board in 2022, might say, let's take a flyer on him and try and trade for him and plug him in at left tackle and see if he can continue what he did at Alabama. I don't think that's outside of the realm of possibility. I think that there's definitely NFL teams that might have interest in Evan Neal because of what he did at college, and he's not that far removed from being a collegiate player. So maybe he gets an opportunity to start at left tackle, or at least compete for a starting left tackle job elsewhere. Or maybe the Giants should do the smart thing here and say, listen, we know you don't want to play guard, but we need to see what we have in you before it's too late, so you're going to have to play left guard. And that's where they should plug him in. Move him on the interior, see if he plays any better. If all of a sudden he turns into one of the most dominant offensive linemen in the NFL by playing guard, then that's awesome. If he at least turns into something above average, that's awesome. But right now, it's not sustainable to have a league worst offensive tackle protecting the right side of your line, having poor communication with other players around him, missing blocks, committing penalties. This isn't sustainable. The Giants can't keep doing this. They need to try something else. And they learned a really tough lesson with Eric Flowers years ago. They drafted him to be a left tackle, didn't work. Moved him to right tackle, didn't work. Refused to move him to guard because he didn't think he was a guard. He goes elsewhere, becomes a pretty good guard, a starting quality level guard for 2 teams. He was with the Dolphins and the Commanders, became a very good player. Not a very good, but he became a good player in the NFL. And the Giants, had they just woken up a little bit sooner and said, hey, we got to try him on the interior before it's too late, they could have found themselves a decent offensive lineman. I don't want to see the same thing happen to Evan Neal. I think that the Giants will be wasting an opportunity if they don't at least try him at offensive guard. I know Joe Schoen said it's not really something they're considering. I think it's something they're going to have to change their mind on going into 2024. Add some help at right tackle, then have Evan Neal compete at both right tackle and the guard spot. Why can't Evan Neal compete at more than one position? Ben Bredesen competed for left guard, center, and right guard all offseason long, so why can't Evan Neal compete at guard and tackle? I'm not so sure, but I think that it's something that the New York Giants need to reconsider and kind of force upon Evan Neal. And if he really hates it that much, ask for a trade, get your agent to start calling different teams, see if there's anybody out there who wants to play you at left tackle. Go for it. Maybe the Giants get a decent mid-round pick out of it, turn that into something trading up, or maybe they flip that for us an established veteran offensive lineman. Who knows? There's definitely a few ways that the Giants can play that, but Alex, when you're thinking about it from that perspective and, taking a look at maybe Evan Neal doesn't want to play guard, but tough, right? Like the Giants should probably at some point force him in onto the inside, and if he doesn't like it, go play elsewhere. But I imagine you're in the same boat as me. They got to at least try it out before it's too late and it turns into an Eric Flowers situation.
100%. I mean, look, the truth is simple. At the very least, they need to be having Evan Neal compete at tackle and guard during training camp. They need to be cross-training him there because they need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. If the worst-case scenario unfolds and they're not ready for it and they can't move him because he has no experience at guard, at least NFL experience, or isn't training with the first team in that capacity, there needs to be a fire under his butt. This can't be like, yeah, it's your position to lose again. Yeah, it's your position to lose again, year in and year out, the same old freaking story. This is like the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And the Giants sometimes do this where they force a square peg into a round hole and expect it to suddenly turn round. And I just don't think that is a competent strategy any longer. The Giants have money. The Giants can invest in offensive line support. The Giants can add competition, and they should. And look, I think that Joe Schoen acknowledges this, though. I think every time we have these conversations and we're like, we need this guy, we need to invest here, we need to upgrade this, generally they have done that, whether it be adding, a pass catcher like Darren Waller, which was a de facto kind of like supplement to a WR1 that we didn't have the affordability to actually go out and achieve this past offseason. Or it was, another cornerback, drafting a cornerback like Deonte Banks. It could be a myriad of different things. Like they've generally addressed the positions. Linebackers a big one. We begged them to get new linebackers, and look what they did. They went out and turned our linebacker weakness into an absolute strength. I mean, by all accounts, we've asked them to address things, and they have. Jalen Hyatt, we needed a downfield threat. John Michael Schmitz, we needed a long-term center. They've gotten a lot of these things and invested out and allocated resources towards plugging these gaps. The next one, in my opinion, is going to probably be quarterback, and obviously, they need to add competition to the right tackle, and they need to add a veteran right guard, in my opinion. I am not trusting Marcus McKethan to take a big step forward. I don't trust Justin Pugh. Justin Pugh's a fine reserve, guys, but he is not a great starter. If you go look at his numbers recently, they're not very great. Like, he was a fine guy off the couch to help, play games and just kind of step up and fill some gaps, but like he's a middling starter at best. So I do believe that we need some substantial reinforcements. I like Ben Bredesen. I think he's a much better left guard than he is a right guard. In fact, I'd prefer to him be starting there. But the truth is that the Giants don't really have a competent right guard at the moment because of Mark Lewinsky hasn't been around. Maybe he'll be around on Monday night, so we'll see about that. But, at the end of the day, I really would love a veteran like Kevin Zeitler. I would love the Giants to maybe even spend a second-round pick on an offensive guard and go in that direction. Or spend that money on a right tackle that could compete with Evan Neal and at the very least be your competent swing. Tyree Phillips is a fine pass protector. He's a decent pass protector. He can play both tackle spots, but he's not like he's a bad run blocker. Like he has his limitations. So, right now I just feel as though if you're the Giants, why not open Evan Neal up to being exposed to multiple positions where he can have a future and potentially have a fallback option? But if the Giants wait too long and they don't make the proper and necessary moves now in preparations in case of a worst case scenario, guys, we're Giants fans, man. The worst case scenario always happens. We are freaking Giants fans. If we don't expect and predict that the worst case scenario is going to happen, what are we doing anymore? Because it happens every single year. We lose this guy. We lose that guy. This guy stinks. We have to be preparing for those scenarios. And Evan Neal, this is the most obvious one of them all. If you don't prepare for Evan Neal to struggle and fail, then you're just doing yourself a disservice because we need to be able to transition him to guard. I don't give a crap if he doesn't like it. You know what I mean? Of course he wants to make as much money as possible, but you have to prove that you're good enough to play at a very important position in the NFL. If you can't do it, then what do you expect the team to do? Of course they're going to replace you. I still think there's plenty of hope that he can get better, that he can improve, but the truth is simple. He's not playing. And he is always freaking injured. He's even playing injured most of the time. So, can we really depend on him to be a long-term solution at right tackle? Right now, I don't think so. Look, you can reference Austin Jackson. You can reference players that get better over time, but there's a million other examples of players that never did. So, right now, we hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. And Evan Neal, unfortunately, you got to prepare for the worst because he is trending in the wrong direction. So, you need to be proactive in that regard. And that's kind of my final kind of assessment of that situation.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same page here. I think all Giants fans are kind of on the same page. Got to fix the offensive line, whether you're talking about signing a guard like Kevin Seitler, signing a tackle like Jonah Williams, or someone else, Trent Brown, I know is a player that you've mentioned, Alex, or going into the draft and making it a top priority. It's something that the Giants have to address, have to prioritize, and have to ultimately spend some money on. It sucks to say, because the last time the Giants went out into free agency, spent big time money on a tackle, it was Nate Solder. That didn't pan out. That didn't go so well for the Giants. But, maybe this time it works out better. I'm not sure. Maybe they just go on the lower end of the market and get themselves an average, serviceable starter rather than trying to get like a franchise guy like they tried to do with Nate Solder and it didn't pan out. There's definitely options out there for them, though, and it's going to be interesting to see once we get to this offseason. And, of course, we start our free agency coverage, our draft coverage. We're going to talk about all these different options for the Giants. But at the end of the day, Evan Neal, not what we expected him to be through 2 seasons. I'm still hopeful that he can turn it around. The guy had a lot of talent at Alabama, and I hate to just write him off and say that he can't turn into something, but it's going to be tough. It's an uphill battle for him to prove that he's worthy of being a starting caliber player in the NFL, and he's going to have to make a lot of progress in the training camp portion of next season in order to really earn that job. And again, he's going to need some competition competing for that spot alongside him. But that pretty much wraps this one up. Make sure to like if you did enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.